Last time we chatted, Jared, you said that you look forward to the next time we chat where there's a snowy background. I'm looking out my window, and there is the snowy background. I'm back in Calgary.
Yeah, yeah, well, for sure. Don't let this blue sky background fool you. It is nothing but white out there.
That's right. That's right.
Welcome back.
It's fun to know that I no longer have to run in and out of a shelter. I just have to run in and out to shovel the driveway. So it's a different responsibility.
Yeah, the lesser of two evils, though. I would guess there's part of you, Don, that is relieved to be home, a big part, and part of you that wishes you were back in Israel. Anyways, welcome back. I know it was not an easy time, an easy trip home, and we're happy to have you here, safe and sound. But we also know that you've left family back in Israel. The people of Israel are resolute. Um, Not the best time, but an inevitable time. I think the people of Israel know that this is simply something that was inevitable.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the more important aspects of this is the determination of when it happens, if it's on our watch or theirs. The fact that it was going to happen, I don't think anybody can really honestly dispute that. So being in a situation where we were able to determine an initial strike with high efficacy is the most is the best case scenario in a bunch of bad case scenarios, right?
Well, I think so for sure in this in the big war between Israel and Iran. Yes, it was a preemptive strike. I think what's important, most of our listeners will know, but certainly it's worth clarifying. This was not an opening salvo. I mean,
Correct.
Iran's proxies. I mean, Iran has long declared their mission. And when we say Iran, let's not confuse the wonderful people of Iran with the mullahs and the ruling uh, theocratic extremists,
Correct.
the IRGC, the Ayatollah, etc. They're two different entities, as we saw when they murdered 30,000 protesters, when we know that there is approximately 10% of Iranians who actually support the mullahs, the Ayatollah. So let's not mistake those two. But we do know that for the 47 years that they have been in power after the Islamic Revolution 1979, they have declared war on Israel and the United States and the West, essentially. And it's not just been a war of words. I mean, they were developing nuclear capability, but even when that was dampened with the JCPOA, it simply gave them a different route to go in their attempt to destroy Israel and the United States, which was their proxies. And so October 7th was Iran, and Hezbollah is Iran. So, I think it's really important. You well know this, most of our listeners well know this, that this was hardly the start of a war between Iran and Israel.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot there to sort of diagnose. When we take a look at this latest theater that
Mhm.
started on October 7th, uh, when Hezbollah entered the war and Israel defended itself against some of the leaders there, whether they were in Lebanon or Syria, the opening salvo of direct attack between Iran and Israel happened in April of 2024 when Iran sent
Mhm.
missiles into Israel. This wasn't, the mask finally came off, and this is sort of an interesting take that you and I had earlier where we said, let's leave it for the podcast when we were speaking on the phone. It's
Mhm.
the facade of everything that has happened over the last 47 years in terms of sponsor of terrorism being pointed to the IRGC and this, the Ayatollahs and this death cult that has ruled Iran with the sole mission of destroying Israel and Western values is they look at what they're saying now. Hezbollah is our proxy, and we are coordinating with Hezbollah right now to attack Israel. So there's when we said Hamas is a proxy, and people were like, "Well, no, it's a Palestinian resistance group." When we said Hezbollah is a proxy of the IRGC, and people were like, "Well, no, they're just defending southern Lebanon." When we said that Syria is doing what they're doing as a proxy of Lebanon, of Iran, and people were like, "No, they're." All that facade, all that argument has just been completely melted away by the facts on the ground and the statements made by Iran. The defense of this whole process, has now become just a facade, a joke, a paper thin argument.
Well, Don, you're kind of suggesting that it's not like established fact and has been forever. So I think there are people that might not know this and may not, but it's known. I think the bigger challenge, and when I say it's known, I'm talking about like that Hezbollah is an established proxy of Iran. Nobody's denying that. Iran's not denying it. Hezbollah is not denying it. The money
Left-wing
trail is
media,
there.
media
Okay,
in the West is, and
well,
students in academia is.
okay, but
Not
are
now.
they? I think I have a slightly different take.
Okay.
I don't think they're denying it. I think they're embracing it and saying, yes, they're all fighting imperialism. They're all fighting the terrible West that is the oppressor. I don't think that they're denying the relationship. I think they're justifying it. I think they're. I mean, here's what's crazy, and this will take us into to Canada and what we're seeing here. Um, but it's it. We have people that are justifying and heralding the achievements of bin Laden. All of a sudden, when there was unity around 9/11 and what a terrible attack it was, there are people that are justifying it, defending it. I don't think facts are getting in their way. I think ideology is shifting to a very scary place.
A lot of what you're saying is we got to take a look at the different perspectives.
Yeah.
It is very difficult for most people to defend Iran unless you are an existentially is jihadist. It's very difficult to defend anything Iran has done over the last 47 years. And so when we're talking about the people in the middle, not the people in the margins, right? You can say
Mhm.
that you and I, Jared, we're on one side of the margin, people who are very aware of what's happening in our region that affects us, as we should be. And then there are the people on the other side who embrace that jihadist mentality and will use any excuse in the book. We're talking about the people in between those that listen to go to school and listen to professors like MRU's Mark Ayash or Mohamed Ayash, depending on who he's trying to bring into his cult of ideology.
Yeah.
And you listen to the news, like the news, CBC refuses to call Hamas a terrorist organization, yet
Hmm.
IRGC is designated as a terrorist organization, and we know they're proxies. It's this denialism of the reality. And so those people, they see that and they're like, okay, well, Hamas has nothing to do with Iran. They're just there as a resistance group like Che Guevara, and this is something that is inspiring, right? Standing up against the oppressor or the man. And that's all they know. You can almost forgive some of the platitudes coming from that side. the responsibilities on the people who know that are not delivering the message. The responsibilities on universities like Mount Royal University, who keep championing or excusing the hateful rhetoric coming from this IOSH professor at
Hmm.
Emory. And I can go through, a lot of this is formulated in my opinion. I'll state that, but it's based off my personal interaction with him, what I've seen and heard, what he's put on Twitter, right? When this guy says a week after October 7th, before there were boots on the ground in Gaza, that there is a genocide happening in Gaza after the genocide that had happened on October 7th, he is formulating a marketing strategy of hate. There's no way around that. There's no
Yeah.
way around that. And so when I say, the biggest topic that we had that we said we'd talk about this, in my opinion,
Hmm.
where we were at from October 6th to today, all the wars that we've won, I believe that the eighth front of the war is one of them. And it's not to say that we can now rest on our laurels. It's to say that we are much better organized right now from the different alphabet soup of organizations. Our messaging is much more coherent. Our messaging is much more in line with everybody else's, and it's going to continue to get better. And we now know where to focus our defense. And again, not attack, our defense, because I think the facade has broken, and the people in the margin, the people outside the margins, the people in the middle are now looking at this, and they're seeing Iranians holding Israeli flags. They see in Iran Israeli flags being projected on their buildings by Iranians, and they're starting to go, well, maybe we got this one wrong. And
Are
I
you seeing
that's the
that, Don? Are you seeing that? I like okay, so I've seen the flag projected. I'm seeing the things that you are, but I don't think there are many people saying we got this wrong. I think people are more and more embedded. Our public broadcaster is so beyond the pale. I mean, to the point of absurdity. I'm not seeing people changing their minds despite the evidence in front of our eyes showing tens of thousands of Iranian protesters murdered. What this regime has done for the last 47 years. Like none of it. I'm not seeing. I'm
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not, listen, I'm not saying it's a 180. I'm saying
Hmm.
definitely cracks in that armor that never existed before this latest round between the US, Israel, and Iran. I mean, think of how ridiculous we talked last time about the girls' school, right? That of the 170
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
children that were attacked. So the first news comes out, and it is Israeli strikes, and people are 100% certain of it, right? And it comes
Uh-huh.
out on our Western media that that's the case. And then there were rumors that it possibly could have been an Iranian ballistic missile. Now it looks more and more like it was a U.S. Tomahawk missile, and that some of the intelligence, because the school was located right beside an IRGC compound, that they believed it to be a legitimate target. Okay. So now the conversation, and again, to look at this IASH character from MRU, uh, he's flat out saying Israeli strike, and then they're changing the language to say U.S. Israeli strike. So
Hmm.
why didn't they call it a U.S. Israeli strike when it first happened? It's just keeping that word Israel there. I mean, it's such a weak, like the weakness, the death throes of their argument are almost comical for me to see when people on CBC are uh, doing their moral equivalency. It's getting attacked by more and more people. Look at even Pierce Morgan, and I give him some credit here. He is now really taking a look at this, and he's not buying it. Right, Anna Kasparin was just on his show, and they said, it's widely reported that 30,000 that the Iranians killed 30,000 protesters, and she goes, "Oh, it was only 3,000." So, they won't say how many protesters they killed, but within minutes we know there was 165 school kids killed. So, and then she's questioning that number. Now suddenly she's questioning numbers.
Yeah.
And it's becoming so obvious. Look at Trump now talking about Tucker Carlson does not represent MAGA. That's something that was never said for the last 2.5 years. Look at Lebanon now saying that they're going to try and arrest Hezbollah. That was a dream, like from a utopian future that I never believed I would hear in my lifetime. Yet it's happening right now. The shift is coming. Now, are there going to be Jew haters out there that are going to continue, saying, "Oh, I don't hate Jews. I'm just an anti-Zionist." BS. You hate all of this is just your argument to hate Jews. It's very obvious. If we're talking about fair criticism of Israel and its government, talk to any Israeli. If you want to talk, if you want to talk about then questioning the country's legitimacy, get out of here. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's becoming a more and more obvious.
Well, so I hear you. There are some factually there are some really positive realities, and you've named a couple of them. Um, I think that you're coming into our conversation today, seeing things more positively than I am.
Yeah.
I am definitely challenged by what I've seen over the past week. And maybe that's, you coming home from Israel and being surrounded in that, even though it was, a challenging time, being surrounded by a feeling of resilience. I am looking at some of the things that have played out here, and more and more concerned. Now, I see some of the things that you've seen, and so one, and maybe we can, we've talked a little bit about CBC. I'll mention a couple quick things. So first of all, I am reticent to think that there are any significant changes coming to the CBC, despite objective reports demonstrating how biased they are. And people can go back and listen to our conversation with Mike Fagelman from Honest Reporting. But this week, they had a former um, employee reporter, Travis Durange, I think is his name. He testified for the Heritage Committee. Uh, the the bias is so undeniable that the fact that there aren't changes already happening uh, make the likelihood of changes coming anytime soon under this government, which is, oh, we're arm's length, nothing we can do about it. It makes the prospect of anything changing on the public broadcaster very slim, very slim. And we see, I wrote the ombudsman a couple weeks ago because all of a sudden, they had been using Doctors Without Borders, MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, as they were their experts. They were their experts. They were used so much over the last year and a half to vilify Israel. All of a sudden, Doctors Without Borders comes out with a statement that they have to pull out of hospitals in Gaza because they're infiltrated with Hamas and their weapons being stored. Like they had their first eyes wide open moment and declared it so. And the CBC, despite using this group for 2.5 years to vilify Israel, wouldn't report that. It took almost a week before it to even register a blip deep, deep, deep down. Oh, the fact that Hamas is using hospitals as places to store weapons, to have this wasn't a big story.
Well,
And
I mean, but the evidence was there for I mean, the photos, the video evidence, everything was there for such a long time. The CBC is not I mean, it's a government mouthpiece, and I recall that our last conversation, we actually gave credit to the prime minister for his initial statement. Since that initial statement, there have been five or six flip-flops around what he's going to do, his support and then his non-support and then his, well,
Hmm.
of course I meant support. Well, no, of course depends on who he talks to. When we start talking about comparing, Israeli politician corruption, I put them on a scale from zero to Trudeau, and right now maybe Bibi's close to a Carney. Now, make of that what you will, but it's such
Right.
a ridiculous, this is a state-sponsored news organization that knows the Conservative Party wishes to defund it. It is, again, it's death throes. My kids get to my age, the CBC no longer exists. And I'm very comforted by that fact that this is almost treasonous what they're doing. We have $10 million right now offered by the Liberals, which is 2.5 years too late to secure our synagogues and our schools across Canada. Uh, maybe Bondi helped wake them up a little bit, but you didn't have to spend the $10 million. All you had to do was remove 700 IRGC people. All you had to do was condemn some hate speech in a speech or two, and Canadians would have rallied around that positive messaging that killing Jews or threatening Jews in this country is not acceptable. I don't think that anything that I'm saying there is in any way controversial. Yet
Okay.
it's something they
Yeah.
refuse
Yeah.
to say.
Okay, well, so let's just give our listeners context for a second. The 10 million you're talking about was announced
Correct.
yesterday by the Minister of Public Safety, who has budgeted $10 million to give to the Jewish community to secure our brick and mortar organizations, buildings, etc. Now, Don, you're totally right. Like, look, we actually need it because we need security personnel at all these places. We need an infrastructure that can protect us. But what a ridiculous band-aid. What a ridiculous
Correct.
band-aid this
Yeah,
is. I
exactly.
mean, you know how they can, you mentioned they can save their money. Yeah, they could have saved their money by deporting more than 700 IRGC members and affiliates known in Canada. One has been deported. One.
Wow.
One. Okay. There's another that is going through a procedure right now, due process. I believe in due process. But you know where the 10 million could have gone? To hiring more personnel to go and expedite this process.
Right.
Okay. Um, where else could it go? To training for our crown prosecutors to not have people arrested by the police only for charges to be dropped.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's an article I
Uh,
read. There's a National Post article on that that I read that almost all, and again, I don't know the exact numbers, but many, a large proportion of all the charges of the hate speech against Jews that people have been arrested for and charged with have just quietly been dismissed.
been dropped totally. So I mean, there are fixes. There are fixes, and frankly, the worst one and the one of last resort is giving us more money to protect ourselves from being assaulted, being shot, our our buildings being attacked. Why are we here? This is insanity. And I'll tell you the part that gets me, and this is probably why I'm coming in with a far less rosy lenses than you today, is the prime minister seems to just be getting more and more popular in this country. I mean, polls are so. First of all, there's all the craziness around people crossing elected members of parliament crossing the floor. He just had a member of the NDP party, one of their last seven standing, cross the floor. So this prime minister was not elected with a majority government, but has now created one himself, or is on the verge of it. It is insanity. And people are seemingly unbothered by it. I mean, the polls are showing that he is more and more popular every day. I don't get it. This is not the country I grew up in. This is incredibly concerning.
And I think that's also the problem with polls, right? The problem with polls is, they're incentivized to contact the people that they're supposed to contact. What people aren't discussing. The youth vote in the last election went to the
Hmm.
Conservative.
Hmm.
8 point something million people voted, and 3,000 people voted for this NDP floor crosser that's bringing them one step closer to a majority government. Canadians did not vote for a majority government. This is going to, in my opinion,
Hmm.
this is going to absolutely come back to them in a negative way. It's I'm more curious, that's a federal issue. Alberta has been mostly silenced from federal politics for since 2015 at the very minimum, and at different times. But let's talk about what's happening in Alberta. So we have two parties, really a two-party system here in Alberta, and one is still called NDP. We have a federal NDP that is just unabashedly just hateful and creating a dangerous environment for me as a Jewish person.
So
Their
obsessed.
rhetoric,
So obsessed. Yeah.
their rhetoric is puts my family at risk. This is
Hmm.
personal to me.
Hmm.
Why is
Hmm.
our provincial party, who is supposed to be speaking to everybody, why have they not changed their name? Why have they not admonished the federal party or tried to separate them? And I would love to have an NDP member on this podcast in the near future to answer that question and show and answer how are you going to help support Jews in Calgary, and whether their political beliefs are for or against Israel, you are causing us harm. And until
Yeah.
you realize that, I'm going to be holding you to account.
Well, I think you've got some very valid points there. I would say a couple things. So first of all, um, the leader of the provincial NDP historically has been a good friend of the community, Nahad Nenshi. Um, I think
Personally
he's
gave him a
in.
tour. I personally gave Nenshi a tour of the Here to Tell exhibit when it was at the Glenbow.
Yeah,
He showed up, so
yeah.
there's a benefit of the doubt for sure.
Yeah. So actually we need to have him on actually. I think we should have him on. I hope he'll be as welcoming of tough questions as Rabbi Mark Glickman was. For those of you who didn't get a chance to hear that conversation, please do because even with people you disagree with, I love the openness to address anything. It shows a real strength of character. So I'd love to have Nahed Nenshi on. Uh, I think, you know, he has made some moves to distance himself from the federal NDP party. So what we learned earlier this year is he put into place that signing up as a member of the provincial NDP no longer made you a member of the federal NDP. So there is some daylight between them. Okay. Um, I think he's going to be faced. So he still has some people within the party that are spreading that same kind of rhetoric as the federal NDP candidates. And I think they're a problem for him. And I think that at some point, the rubber is going to hit the road and he needs to decide, is this acceptable within the party or is it not? Now, I think there's an interesting dilemma coming for him. And I think Heather McPherson, who is one of the federal NDP candidates and so obsessed with Israel, like beyond. If she cared half as much about what's going on in Canada as she does across the globe, I think her constituents would be better served. Um, Nonetheless, I think she's going to lose the race for party leadership. And I think seeing the NDP being such a sinking ship, I think she's going to come up. The word is she might entertain coming over to the provincial NDP, and I think that is when it gets interesting for Naheed Nenshi and the provincial party. What
Yeah.
are they going to do?
I'd be interested in that. And I think those are relevant questions. And I want to be clear, I'm not accusing the Alberta NDP or Nenshi of doing anything. I just want to
Hmm.
hold them to account because I certainly believe that the federal NDPs and Elizabeth May and all those keffiyeh wearing crazies in Parliament are causing a direct line. There's a direct correlation between their rhetoric and shooting up a synagogue in Toronto and being able to walk through a neighborhood in Toronto and to have people who have done extraordinarily politicians, what Olivia Chow and her reputation in Toronto is for the Jewish community, what our past mayor and her contributions to anti-Semitism in this city, and what Mount Royal University is doing by still standing by somebody who's just clearly in IASH has a anti-Semitic agenda, one that he literally espouses for violence against Jews. And I was there and I have the receipts. I have the transcript of the words that he said, where he says, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Claiming that Israel is the one that's living by the sword is such a ridiculous statement. And this is
Hmm.
allowed
Hmm.
by our academic institutions under the guise of this academic pseudo consensus, which doesn't exist. So,
Yeah.
yes, we are going to hold people to account.
Yeah, and well, and look, I think just quickly putting a bow on the NDP thing. The provincial NDP um, still still have a challenge. There are so first of all, the former premier Rachel Notley, along with former MLA Shannon Phillips, along with current MLA Sarah Hoffman, have all endorsed Heather McPherson. And so, do they agree with every single thing she says? I don't know. But her obsession with Jews and Israel, her willingness to wear a keffiyeh into Parliament, um, seemingly that's not that doesn't disqualify her for endorsement from these folks. I'm extremely disappointed in those three in particular, who I've sat across the table from, had conversations with, talking about our lived experience as Jews in Canada right now, and they saw fit to endorse someone who is clearly obsessed with this issue.
And
So,
yesterday it was important for me to be able to be part of this. There was a part of Holocaust education and human rights, Holocaust and human rights education and remembrance from Federation, of which I'm a volunteer and one of the educators. We had an opportunity to go speak to a school, and in that presentation, where we kind of go through, what the world was like pre-Holocaust, where anti-Semitism comes from, and so forth, and we give quite a good explanation. I'm reminded, and it really struck me from what you're saying right now, that in the late 20s and early 30s, there were Jews that voted for the National Socialist Party, believing that, that's just rhetoric. There's nothing that's really going to happen with that. Where, the Jewish community is too important. It's just a little bit of his financial plan or, his political ideology, something that I agree with outside of that. So let's give this guy a shot. What's the worst that can happen? Lesson learned.
hmm
What's the
hmm
worst that can happen with a person who has such a hateful ideology behind them that's so focused on a minority group? Well, we know what the worst that could happen is, and we will not go silently into the night.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think that I don't know what the numbers were of Jews who supported the National Socialist Party in the 20s and 30s in Germany, but I think you and I well know at this point that there are hardly mainstream voices in the Jewish community that have any time for the federal NDP party, despite the fact that there is by name a Jew running for the leadership. Probably the most hateful out of all of them. I mean, I think he even surpasses Heather McPherson in his vitriol for Israel. But I take a step further, and I have not been a partisan voter in the past. I'm not a card-carrying member of any party, but I do find it incredibly hard to believe that anybody within our community is voting liberal at this point. I mean, it clearly appears to be a party that doesn't really care that much about the safety and well-being of our community.
No, no. And you take a look 30 years ago, there were approximately an equal number of Jewish citizens of Canada as there were Muslim citizens of Canada. And now there are 7 times the number of Muslim citizens in Canada. Now, I am not in any way suggesting that if you are Muslim, you hate Jews. That's a lot of people are taking a look at that, at a statement like that, and there's no racism there. What we're looking at is when you start seeing and hearing members of the cabinet saying, "I have to vote along my constituency's demographic requirements," and those demographic requirements are to espouse hateful ideology against Jews or against Israel, then it's a problem. Then it's a problem. And I have a huge issue with that. And in my lifetime, I have voted liberal. In my lifetime, I can't say I've ever been a huge NDP supporter, but I understood when Alberta voted in Notley what the reasonings were. Especially around that election when Prentice was leader of the party. I understood those things. I understood how that climate could have happened to elect that, and there was no real upset with that. Now we're in a position from a singular perspective, as a single issue voter. If you hate Jews or you spread hate that could affect the safety of my family, you do not get my support nor my vote. And I
Yeah.
do not, and I see that conservatives having the moral clarity, whether they be provincial or they be federal, having the moral clarity to stand up with true Canadian values and true multiculturalism, that we accept different ideas, but we keep to Canadian values.
Yeah. Well, if we bring it down a level even closer to home, I don't know if you saw this, but last week this was a really great social experiment, and I hope the mayor saw this with eyes wide open. As we know, um, this mayor has been a real breath of fresh air.
Yep,
I
for sure.
mean, like I think the two things about Jeremy Farkas that have given me some hope. Number one, he is trying to govern. He is trying to lead. And I'm saying this from like the water feeder perspective. I'm saying this from the perspective of clearing snow off of our roads. I'm saying this from like he's doing mayor things without virtue signaling.
Right.
Like he's governing. And thankfully he's got actually a council that seems far more functional than the last one. But the other thing that he's doing is saying, I don't care what you are. I don't care if you're Muslim, Sikh, Hindu, Caucasian, Anglican, Jewish, Mormon. You're a Calgarian and you need to be safe in our city. That's it. That's it. So
And
he's
more
made that
so,
commitment. Well,
and
yeah,
even
go ahead.
and even further than that, not only
Yeah.
you're going to be safe, you're not allowed to intimidate other Calgarians. That's not what the values of a Calgarian are, let alone a Canadian. So it's the silver rule and the golden rule. The silver rule, don't do unto others. This is, you shall do unto others as you will have be done unto yourself. So that's where I give him a lot of credit. Now, at the beginning of his tenure as mayor, there was the flag issue that I had an issue with. But
Yep.
ever since, you take the good and the bad of somebody, overall, his ledger is somebody who is really focused on making Calgary a happier, better, more inclusive space.
Completely, completely. And he also is great at spotting bullshit. And
Right,
he's expressed that. He understands what hateful rhetoric is. He's not being fooled by it. But the interesting thing that happened on social media, and I'm not really on Instagram. I'm going to give you my take from my perch here on Facebook. This weekend, had a post. Um, he had a post where he met with and took a picture with the General Consul of Colombia. 82 likes,
right,
6 comments. No concerns. Hey, you stick to governing, stick. Seemingly, Jeremy Farkas sees value in establishing relationships with Colombia. Maybe there's business opportunities. Maybe there's ways to benefit Calgary. I would only assume so. I would only assume so. 82 likes, 6 comments. Then we go to, he also met with the consul general from China. China is one of the greatest human rights violators on the planet right now.
right.
Probably the greatest adversary to the West that we have. 163 likes, 31 comments. No dislikes, no unhappies, no nothing like that. No comments really, hey, stick to the Bears Paw waterline.
Right, right.
Meets with the ambassador to Israel. 992 comments, over 1,000 emojis, many of which, over 250, are dislikes. I mean, this is where I get back to, how is it possible that people are turning bin Laden into a hero, turning the Ayatollahs into, hey, hands off Iran, um, and the obsession with Israel and Jews continues. And frankly, I hope this was simply another uh, eye opener for the mayor as to how obsessed the anti-Israel camp is. What can I tell
And
you?
it's the amount of dialogue, the 992, because I'm just looking at it right now and taking a look at some of these comments. The Zionist law, we're pulling the Zionist lobby out of Canada, and then there's a bunch of replies uh, saying that is the dumbest comment that I've ever heard. You're you're getting people uh, who are saying, you know, batshit crazy things. And then you're getting a
Mhm.
lot of people responding to that. This is where I'm optimistic. Now, you're right. Is there a spotlight on everything Jews? Yes.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's sad, and it's not going to stop anytime soon with CBC leading the forefront on this. That's just not going to happen. But what we're seeing is people responding to this and saying, no, you're crazy. Like these comments, this makes no sense. I see comments, I see emojis with a cross and a Magen David right beside each other. Sure, I see
Mhm.
some watermelons here and there. and some other people who are saying free Palestine. Um, Not all Calgarians stands with them. Some of us stand with Iran and with Israel. Some of these comments, when you go through it, it's not 992 anti-Semitic or
No, no,
anti-Jewish.
no, no, certainly not.
There's a lot of
Certainly not.
support, and so it is a lightning rod. And for the mayor to post that, the mayor to stand by what he's done, this is where I give him credit. I don't have to agree with every single thing he's done, which I don't. But for him to stand up, that takes that offers a credibility and a trust in a public servant that we've been lacking for a while.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. And look, you're the upper today. I'm the downer. That's just the way it's going to go today, I think. But
No, but
um,
I'm an upper, but with the caveat, with a huge asterisk. Like everything you're saying is absolutely true, but that's where we as a community, we are much more aligned. We're much more strategic in how we're doing this. We have the path forward. We just have to continue. We're never done. We can never sit on our laurels again, right? It's for example, the border with Gaza, because like I said, we did that Kfar Aza tour.
yeah,
It's forever going to be different. Right? We're
yeah,
now going to have to put more focus, more money, more attention, more scrutiny, more technology, more soldiers, more defense on that forevermore.
yeah,
But we
yeah.
that's a lesson we learned. This is a lesson we learned. We now have to be more unified on the eighth front of that war because it that's never going to end, but we're now able to slough off some of the more ridiculous elements that we've had to spend a lot of time and energy on.
Well, okay, so that's a great point, and actually, I've had a couple things that I want to discuss, and we've gone through all of them except the last one. And I
Perfect.
think it's a really important one based on what you're saying right now, Don, and some of my observations from the week. One of the reasons that you and I started this podcast was you and I came in from slightly different angles. We had slightly different backgrounds in the community. And I think that one of the things that really brought us together was the desire to help the community become more unified through understanding, through common purpose, etc. And I've seen sort of I've had kind of two experiences over the past week. And I think Don, we've also gotten a lot of feedback from the community about how valuable people find that. Us kind of bringing everything together and helping people understand and connecting some dots within the community, etc. I've seen two things, so let me convey these couple experiences and then let's discuss. So one is I've seen um, I've seen some rumblings, and I feel like this happens, especially when a community feels under threat, where it really sows dissent. And I've seen some individuals and some organizations, and when I say individuals, I'm not talking about random people. I'm talking about people with voices, influencers, if you will, being very critical of established legacy organizations within the community.
Yeah,
I'm
fair
not
enough.
seeing this. I'm not seeing this in Calgary, and I think that is part of what we've taken some pride in. Is this doesn't seem to be as prevalent in Calgary, but I'm sure it exists. Where people are angry at legacy organizations, and there's a very natural reaction. Why are they getting money? They can't even protect us. Blah blah blah. Like I
I've seen
get it,
those.
but yeah, this
Yeah.
is a response to feeling under threat. And it's like you're not doing anything. Someone else should take the money. They'll do so. This is hard. This is a hard place to be.
Yeah.
And I think the flip side is I had a chance to be part of a briefing with William Daroff, who is the CEO of the Conference of Presidents, and what this is an organization in the States that is an umbrella organization for all the major organizations from the reform movements biggest umbrella to the ADL to who would be more on the right? Well, B'nai B'rith type organizations, GNF, like all of the major organizations, JFCUIA, etc. A huge range of diversity of opinion between these organizations. And I asked them, I said, how are you creating unity? And I think it's something that, again, I think we have this and cannot take it for granted in Calgary. We need to actively work on it. We're seeing seeds of dissent more out east, I would say. And this guy, said, look, we're not going to agree on everything, but we are not here to tear each other down. We are so much weaker as a community if and when we do that. And so we will have our
100%.
disagreements, but at the end of the day, we need to be unified. And so, in personal conversations that I've had, I've talked about this on a micro level. Okay, you don't like the person that's the head of that organization or the head of that organization. Do what you can to make them better. Do what you can to make them better. Do not tear them down. It only makes us worse. And so if there's one message that I think you and I have really tried to bring to the Calgary Jewish community, and I hope it spreads beyond, is don't tear each other down. We don't have to like everything that's happening. If you want to direct your energy, direct it to making the organizations better,
100%.
and making us stronger. Okay, what do you make of all that?
I think that is, look, one of the things that we don't have here in Calgary. We may have had some graffiti. The synagogues here haven't been shot at. People aren't walking through our community. So the threat level is much higher. So being vocal against it makes a lot of sense. If that was happening here, I'd be, shouting and screaming for the resignation of a bunch of members of the board. It makes sense. But what we need to do in terms of that unification, interestingly, I had this conversation with Rob Nagus, from Federation here in Calgary, to connect us with the heads of federations from Toronto and North York and Vaughan. Let's get their perspective on this and get the word out. Do they have a platform to actually say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're advocating, and these are the barriers that we're hitting? Then we can hit what those barriers are. Right. Again, it's about being strategic. When you're in a world where you are under threat, and I'm saying your safety is under threat, like existential. Like if you're in Toronto in that neighborhood, something's going to happen. You just know it, right? It's kind of like, some people were telling me, I don't think an attack on Iran is going to happen, and I'm like, you don't move the aircraft carriers or the pieces on the chessboard at that amount of cost to attack and then don't attack. It's going to
Yeah,
happen, right?
yeah,
If you're allowing these people to walk through residential neighborhoods, something eventually is going to happen because it's high emotion, high stakes, and high threat, especially with terrorists in this country allowed to stay. So,
yeah,
what do we do? Let's focus on where we need to go. I understand where the complaints come from. Let's strategize on what those solutions are.
yeah,
Unfortunately, we had to wait until three synagogues were shot at. And I don't honestly, this is, as rosy as I am, the only reason that I believe that $10 million was offered was because the US consulate was shut up.
yeah, yeah. I think that changed the equation
That
for sure.
changed the equation. So,
Yeah,
Jews, they're fine. That okay. Well, now things are getting ridiculous. Now maybe we should do something tokenized. So they're doing that. Within the community, we still have the issue of the token Jew, right? You have the kafia wearing again MRU, our local sponsor of terrorist rhetoric. Doctor what's her name, Roberta Lexier, wearing her kafia around to show everybody what a good Jew is supposed to look like. And if you don't, she's technically safe. It's just such a ridiculous trope, and it's such it's not that it's treason. You know, a lot of people compare these as a Jews to capos during the Second World War, during the Holocaust, and I don't, because I believe capos did it under threat of death. They're doing it under just for profit or for acceptance, which is such a weak a weak thing. If you have a problem with the Jewish community, like the perfect example is bringing in Rabbi Glickman. We had questions about bringing our former mayor to speak at an event. He stood by it. I stand by him now for that, having that discussion, where before the discussion, yeah, I was certainly, parts of me were irate about that decision. Now I understand, because we had the discourse. There's
Yeah,
always the option of doing that while keeping the entire community unified and safe.
totally. Well, and I think, look, as I mentioned, um, we have to acknowledge the reality that things are just really challenging right now. And whether it's Toronto Federation or Calgary Federation or BB or JNF, whatever, it's hard. And people have the community's best interest in mind. We need to understand what's happening. And so, again, getting back to it, it's kind of why we started this. We wanted to facilitate greater understanding.
Yeah, and we're going to see where this continues to grow. I think, like I said, and we do need to address. We do have a couple of interviews that we've done over the past little while that we're kind of putting on hold because of the that we haven't sort of published yet because of the situation. We want the schmooze to be as informative as possible, and it's been over a week since our last episode, and it was a very small one. We're going to continue on this path for the next few weeks. We are going to still do some interviews for later releases as episodes. I do want to talk about one resource. Stand With Us has a great podcast that they have. It's more of an update. So if you just search up Stand With Us, and like they've had Jonathan Cornricas, 15-minute updates. This is what's happened over the last few days. They've had Erica Laban on it. It's if you have time, only 15 minutes. Take a look at that. We are going to be talking to some people within the community about what's happening in Israel right now, and we might be publishing those, but it's going to be a lot more focused. And we really do want to hear from you, the listeners. Who else should we talk to about what's happening within? But I think that what I'd really like to see is holding some of the politicians' feet to the fire around some of the rhetoric, and that's where I'd like to see some of our future episodes go.
Yeah. All right, Don. Well, great to schmooze with you today and catch up, and hope our listeners enjoy it. This is a little bit of a different format, but I enjoyed catching up with you on all this stuff.
Yeah, as always, it's chatting with you as well. It's also I like the intellectual pushback into some of the ideas. Makes me think, makes me fortify some of the ideas that I've had and change them. And I think that's the beauty of it, Jared. You and I don't always agree on everything, but like I said, through dialogue, we usually end up in the same spot, which is nice. And that's what we encourage our listeners to do as well. Get into dialogue, stay unified. We are all in this together.
For sure, for sure. Thanks, Don. Let's go shovel.
All right, you bet. Thanks for listening, guys.